Well, thank you very much. And we're here on behalf of the chairs who attended yesterday's afternoon's meeting. So, first of all, thanks to them. Thanks to the 17 organizations that were represented by chairs. We had two that weren't able to come, but I think that was a good representation of the people that run voluntarily the boards of directors for the organizations represented here today. We've had very positive feedback from the meeting, and that means that there's an expectation that we're going to do good follow-up as well. First of all, I want to say that we had very positive feedback, but we also had very good discussion with CFI, with Sylvain and Mohammed, and we thank you for that. You were really open and receptive to the ideas that we had put forward, so thank you. And they have agreed to work with us in terms of the follow-up that we've looking forward to doing. So we appreciate that. This meeting yesterday was a follow-up from previous meetings, but we decided to take a different approach to the development of the agenda. David and I had talked to the CFI at the beginning about having this meeting. And so what we did was we solicited board agenda items we would talk about with the chairs. Although there was many suggestions, we ended up talking about 3. Those were governance, funding, and data practices. Those are the 3 that were selected. And so we spent yesterday afternoon talking about those 3 areas. We also had a discussion. We were able to have a discussion with the parliamentary secretary who came as well. And that was important because, and Sylvain, you talked about this further this morning, is that there are priorities, government priorities, and they offer an opportunity for us, an exciting opportunity for us to work with CFI and with our clients, our colleagues, our researchers to address some of these priorities. But we need to have results from that meeting yesterday. So there will be follow-up. It's early days, but we feel that there's an opportunity for board chairs to work together between years, between workshops, and to further some of these ideas that we talked about yesterday. We will have a report. Jim and I will take this responsibility to do a report to the chairs that were there, but as well to the chairs that weren't there, as to what we discussed and the follow-up that we think we agreed to and that we think is important. We also will have a letter, and Sylvain has agreed to this, that we will have a letter to him about some of the areas that we think have opportunities for improvement and follow-up for us as well. We also think, though, that there's an opportunity to really look at what's happening in other areas. For example, the CFI is looking at impact measures. We think that's a real opportunity for us. We also think that there's opportunities within the idea of a science and innovation strategy that we keep coming back to. But there's also an interest in what Janet King's group is doing that she's chairing in terms of the CCA as well. So we think that there's opportunities to hear and listen to what's going on and see how that applies to us. Now, we had, as I say, 3 specific areas, and so I'm going to be talking about funding, and my colleagues will talk about the other 2 areas. On funding, we continue the discussion on the challenges of the cost recovered, the matching funds. There's no way that this elephant in the room can be ignored, but we think that there's real opportunities for us to sit down and look at what can we do to talk about what are the costs in the broad sense of the costs of this matching funding. For us on the ground, we see that there's realities when you're seeking these matching funds. Is it going out and seeking it? It's the fact that they can be short-term and that you're investing in areas that may not come forward in the long run time. What is the cost of this? In some cases, I can speak to the fact you end up doing routine work rather than innovative science work because you need that money coming in. So I think there's opportunities for us to really do more outlining of what that is. But the CFI is aware of this. and we appreciate the fact that they're working hard to look at how can we address some of these challenges of that. So under the task, we see this as a task facing CFI, but what can we do to help CFI to address the areas of funding? What is the role of provinces? How do we coordinate with the equipment funding? How do we work with other sources and look at what's happening and what is the benefits of how we're working? So funding is not going to be solved tomorrow, but we understand the challenges much better amongst all the chairs, and CFI understands our challenges too. So I'm going to go to my colleague, David.
Sure. Okay. Let's wrote this down a little bit. Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Linda. So those of you who were here last year might have recalled that we had a session looking at questions around research infrastructure and data. And I was last year advocating for the idea that it's a useful sort of heuristic thing to do to actually think about major science initiatives and also the MRFs as basically being very large machines that produce data. They do lots of other things, but when you take a sort of data-centric approach to these infrastructures, things look a little bit different to you than if you're thinking about them as large buildings with equipment and people inside. That's a different kind of facilities lens on it. But when you really think about it the other way around as data-generating machines, you start to think more in terms of all of the necessities required in a sort of normal data life cycle for doing scientific research. So I've been advocating for this for a little while, and last year we were, and this is actually just pointing out the problem you mentioned, is that this was last year, and we haven't done really much about it since last year, except we did release through the Office of the Chief Science Advisor a report, which is online, which is a short report making a set of 5 recommendations about creating a national data governance framework. And so we brought that back to the table yesterday to talk a little bit about the implications of that report for the MSI chairs. And since last year, I think a number of contextual factors have actually changed sufficiently that it actually only increases the need for thinking about data governance much more seriously. Not least of which are the things that are also preoccupying the federal government, which is funding all of this. And those would include the uptick in AI and the need to respond, as a country to AI opportunities and threats. The new sort of global multilateralism that was reflected in the Davos speech suggests actually that our research infrastructures might also similarly want to think about a new kind of multilateralism with respect to international research partnerships, and that has a lot of implications for how we generate and share data. Data standards, certifications keep on proliferating and actually getting better. So we actually have we're chasing a standards and certification race internationally. And I suppose the last thing I would add to this is that there are more and more different kind of nuances and flavors and articulations of the need to have different kinds of data sovereignty in Canada. So lots of interesting contextual factors here. So I think that the arguments that we've been making about having an improved data governance framework for Canada is part of a larger conception, I think, about what a national science strategy should look like, and data governance has to be part of that. For the MSIs in particular, what we're really interested in avoiding is a real problem with respect to data, which is that we literally spend billions of dollars generating data every year. And then a lot of data actually ends up being a stranded asset. People have troubles accessing and using it, and that's not very prudent economic behavior, but it's also just bad for science. So what we're trying to think about is then what would actually be the ways forward for the MSI program that would enable us to actually have much better production and use of data while acknowledging all of those other contextual driving factors that I was just mentioning. So one of the outcomes then of yesterday's very fruitful meeting was that we're going to go down the path of of collaborating with the CFI, but other organizations that are in this orbit, to think about a data governance framework that becomes operational. So we need a little road mapping exercise, I think, much like what some of our other country peers around the world do. Particularly, I like the way that Australia handles this through ARDC, but something similar to that, so we can actually say, well, what, like, just staying quite focused for the moment, like, what would the MSIs really need, say, in 18 months or 2 years, in terms of really good advice about how to govern their data, and to work collaboratively with the CFI to make sure that we're actually doing this in a way that reflects their aspirations for the programs, while also meeting the needs of the individual MSIs. So I'm going to personally take this on as a bit of a mission to work with, Lynn and Jim and all the rest of the other MSI chairs, and also with the CFI to actually advance this mission. So that, I think, is a pretty positive outcome.
What, me?
Yeah.
Well,
You're last.
okay. I should have warned you that I can speak indefinitely. You might have left me. So I'll start by talking about governance, and in an effort to sort of emulate how Einstein thinks. Can you not hear me? I can hear me just fine. Okay, how's that? That any better? So I just keep going. Yes,
That's good.
all right. If you can't explain something simply, you don't really understand it. So that's an Einstein quote. I'll give another one in a few minutes. That was pretty smart, right? Governance. So in the context of what we're talking about, governance is a well-used word in this sector. In the opening commentary, we sort of came to a very simplistic understanding, or at least we attempted to come to a simplistic understanding of governance. Governance is not limited to the board. Governance is the process by how an organization decides what to do, and also when to stop something from happening that might be harmful, and how to correct something that might have happened. So that's the stages of governance. And so in the context of these MSIs, advisory committees play a strong role in what the possibilities of what these organizations could do. The role of the board is to assess those opportunities, ensure that the organization is staying true to its mandate, living within its means and the like, and also plays the role of correcting things that might have happened, to the organization. So when you start with that sort of umbrella, it actually starts to simplify the conversation. And you say, well, if that's a simplistic model, I hope we can all agree that the governance structures that exist today for the MSIs, as diverse as they are not simple. In a backdrop, and we talked about this at length yesterday, and I want to thank the contribution of all the members of the meeting yesterday. On the backdrop of what David sort of just talked about, where the country is going under, the Davos speech, which really talks about the dramatic changes happening in the geopolitical framework, AI, and also this, need for dual use as an approach. It really a call to action for all of us. How do we support the country in what we're doing? How does the work that we're doing collectively, how's the work we're doing with the CFI going to actually react to something like this? And can we step up and start to think about how we might simplify our governance models to actually more quickly affect the change that we want? And so that's something that it is a work item that we will continue. And that actually is basically Einstein saying everything should be as simple as possible, but not simpler. Correct? And I would challenge anybody to just say that we have a very simple governance model. And to build on what Linda talked about, and this was a very strong point that was made yesterday, while we're talking about these three items as if they're sort of separated, they're interlinked. Funding models drive behavior. In the event where some of the facilities have more than one alternate funding source, to be true to those other funding sources, to avoid taxation without representation, that those organizations have to shift how they govern themselves. That's not pervasive in all the MSIs. So we accepted finally that the governance models of each of the MSIs could be heterogeneous. In fact, they will be all slightly different. But we started to think about what principles apply to all of us. And that is the work that we intend to take forward. But what are the common things that, working with the CFI, we would say every MSI is going to agree to these sorts of things going forward from a governance perspective, because the CFI itself is, I hope, on the verge of getting us huge step function some funding. I know at ONC, the ONC investment over the course of its original investment is $600 million. That's just one of the MSI. So if you're looking at a 10, 15-year horizon, how much more money is going to go into these facilities? It demands a better job at governing. And the reason is because the more money that goes into these things, the bigger the lens we open for people to look at where is this money going and why is this a good use of our funding. So, what David is talking about in data and the importance of making sure we're making the best use of that, what Linda was talking about funding, all play to how we continue to evolve our governance. And governance is not a destination. It's a road of a continuous improvement. And the other things that the chairs are talking about is how can we learn from each other? So as Linda talked about, we intend to have ongoing dialogues amongst ourselves and want to engage with the CFI in terms of making the entire system continue to improve. So that's where we landed. I think we have time for questions. And I want to actually invite a reaction from the CFI to some of. First, Alan, are you allowed to answer a question? Go ahead, Al.
I wasn't going to ask a question. It's Alan Wilderman, Center for Biodiversity Genomics. Just to add a little bit to the conversation, I think you've summarized our afternoon very well. But just to build a bit more on this notion that it's very hard to talk about these things in isolation. If you, just to put an example on it, if you have an MSI that has funding from CFI, funding from NSERC, funding from Genome Canada, maybe a couple of foundations, maybe some money from the province that they're in. So there might be, say, 6 funding bodies, each of which have an agreement that's signed off by the host institution with a set of KPIs in it on where the data is going to go and how the data is going to be distributed. To apply a governance structure over top of that somehow can provide guidance when there's all of these other forces yanking on it from below. That was really the nub of the challenge. I just wanted to try to articulate how those 3 things were so hard to tease apart. It's in an example like that.
Thanks for and any other board chair that wants to come up and augment the summary that we provided, please step at the mic, Niels.
Niels Peterson from Glyconet. One of the things I think we need to recognize is that the CFI, as I understand it, are really making these programs very high profile over the next couple of years and are really therefore also causing us to be much more diligent about what we do and how we do it. So therefore, the governance structures that we have in place must reflect the risk mitigation that is in place for us and making sure that we are good stewards of public funds. And I think that's one of the key focal points because, as I understand it, the CFI is really making this a cornerstone of their policies over the next couple of years of funding and so on. So we have to up our game as the MSIs in that regard.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, agreed. Any Sylvain?
Sylvain.
I just thought I'd give the board chair speak first, or
anybody else?
Anybody else? So I'm going to pick it up where Niels left, right? I think the next couple years will be extremely important for our MSI program and the CFI. So I truly believe we're at an inflection point. I mean, Claudia this morning talked about and the way we're going to do the rollout of the program, where we're going to be. We want to go to the federal government in the fall of 2027 for the budget, 28 for Triumph. It's going to be important. And not only for the 6 MRF, which are indicated, but also for all of this group here. So I truly believe that. You all understand that, the matching fund is a challenge. But you have to understand that our contribution agreement with the federal government dictates that we have this matching funds. So we're not the bad cops. You're just taking the contribution agreement, the funding agreement that we have from the federal government, and we have to implement it. Having said that, there's light at the end of the tunnel. So you're all aware that in the fall of 2025 budget that was just released, right? There was a program called the Impact Plus Chairs and everything which comes with it. Very large sums of money. CFI was targeted positively, okay, with $400 million in support of bringing this talent to Canada. I think but 100%, usually what happens is for these kind of funding, either it be CHELF or IF Innovation Fund, there's a requirement for matching. The team at CFI worked extremely hard with, end of convincing the federal government that this $400 million that comes with very little strings attached. And I don't know if there are people from ISED in the room, but I would like to applaud them for the contribution they have made on this file. So there is no matching fund required for this $400 million. And we give full flexibility of the institution to decide how much of that goes to capital versus operations. So we're making headways in that space. But coming back to the matching fund. So there is an opening now at the federal level to understand that, yes, it is difficult, etc. We still have our contribution agreement from 2019 and we have to obey according to the boundary conditions imposed on us. My tour of the 10 provinces and territories, I speak to the provinces all the time, right? We recognize the challenge. They recognize the challenge. So I need to bring this message back to the federal government to tell them the way it rolls out. On the governance side of things, Jim, right? Yes, thank you. First of all, I would like to thank the three of you. In fact, I would like to thank the 17 representatives for these MSI that were hosted at the CFI yesterday. Much appreciated. Looking forward to the report that you will be providing us. We'll take a close look at what the recommendations are, and we'll come back to you. On the governance side of things, right? I mean, I think what is important is the role that the board of the MSIs play, but also the role that the host institution, maybe with an S, institutions, have to play in bringing these MSIs forward, right? The relationship that exists, okay? So that's important. And then finally, the role that the federal government should play in the governance of these structures. In some other countries, government is owner of these major research facilities. It's not the way it works here in Canada, but maybe moving forward, this is something that we can bring to the attentions to the federal government. David, thank you very much for putting together this national data framework. I think we need this. We absolutely need this. I said yesterday, and I'm going to repeat here again, we had the president of DRAC, Michael, put your hand out. Thank you, Michael. So we've been in discussion with the Digital Research Alliance of Canada, and there was a survey that was made last year with all the MSIs to look at the present need of this whole data life cycle and the future data life cycles. It's not 19 individuals which need data. It's thousands. It's tens of thousands of students that needs data accessibility and the whole life cycle. So the storage and the use and access and all of that. And I'll leave it at that. We are at an inflection point, and I'm glad that my board chair is here because she hears it. Our next meeting is in Winnipeg in 10 days, and these issues will be discussed. Thank you.
Great. Claim Sylvain. So in terms of closing comments, I want to thank the people at the CFI, specifically you, Sylvain, you, Ahmed, for opening up this dialogue and committing to keeping the dialogue open. I also want to thank all the board chairs. I have to tell you, I was very pleased to see that I would say almost the entire conversation was about the collective challenges we face. So there wasn't a lot of yes, but here's my problem. We're all committed to work on this collectively. And lastly, we can't leave without thanking our note takers who did an amazing job, Sonia Schellenberger and Nancy Carter, to give us the fodder for the reports that we think you need to do, and also capturing the actions that came out of the meeting to make sure we stay true to the commitment we've made to each other and also to the CFI. So look for more of this in upcoming sessions. This is all meaningful and very important work for this country. In a look forward perspective, if you think about the urgency that emanates from the current Prime Minister, it's important for us to speed up our nimbleness in terms of addressing some of the challenges this country faces. So I'm very excited about the outcome of yesterday's meetings, and I look forward to continuing the conversation. Thank you all.
Thank you.